The diner on Station Cora 9 was always full of noise. Machines humming, alien voices blending in strange harmony, lights flickering under the haze of recycled air. But when the door slid open that evening, everything went quiet for a moment. A human had walked in. He looked out of place, too small, too pale, too tired. His clothes were old, dusted with travel stains from 100 different planets. His boots clinked faintly against the metal floor, and his eyes, those gray human eyes, looked like someone who had seen too many endings. The name on his ID badge read, Evan Hale. He didn't wear it proudly. It hung from his neck like a memory he couldn't throw away. He chose a seat by the window, where the violet clouds of Cora 9 rolled and flashed with lightning. Outside, the storms looked endless. He liked that. It reminded him of home. From behind the counter, a tall, silver-skinned waitress noticed him. She was unlike anyone on Earth could imagine. 4 luminous eyes, 2 graceful arms that shimmered faintly under the lights, and a calm, steady presence. Her name was Lyria. She picked up a digital notepad and glided over. Her voice was soft but curious. "Welcome, traveler. You must be from far away." Evan looked up, surprised that she sounded almost kind. "Yeah," he said quietly. "A little farther than most, I think." She tilted her head. "Earth, right? That small blue world from the Terran system?" He gave a faint smile. "You've heard of it?" "Of course," she said, her lower eyes blinking with amusement. "The humans. The species that keeps doing the impossible." He chuckled, a tired sound. "That's one way to describe stubbornness." Lyria smiled back, something gentle flickering in her gaze. "What will you have?" He hesitated. The menu was full of words he didn't know. Strange glowing drinks and steaming plates of things that pulsed faintly. Whatever's safe for humans." She laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. "You're lucky. I keep a few Terran recipes for traders. We had a captain once who taught me how to make something called stew?" Evan's expression brightened a little. "You know how to make stew?" "Something close," she said, smiling. "It doesn't explode, so that's a good start." For the first time in weeks, he laughed. A real laugh. When she brought his food, he ate slowly, almost reverently. The taste wasn't perfect, it was off, metallic, but it was warm. It felt human. Lyria leaned against the counter, studying him. She'd seen thousands of travelers pass through this diner, miners, smugglers, traders. But there was something different about this one. Most species came with pride or fear. He came with silence. "You don't talk much," she said finally. Evan shrugged. "I've said too many things that didn't matter." She tilted her head again, thoughtful. "Then maybe you should say something that does." That made him pause. He stared into his bowl, then said softly, "Back home there used to be blue skies. Real ones. We'd look up and think the world would always be there. But it wasn't, it never really is." Lyria frowned slightly. "What happened to your world?" He sighed. "We happened. Wars, greed, pride. Take your pick. I guess I came here because I wanted to see something that hadn't fallen apart yet." Her eyes softened. "You came to the wrong station for that," she said gently. "Cora 9's falling apart too. Just slower." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll feel at home." They didn't talk much after that. The diner slowly returned to life. The hum of machines, the laughter of customers, the sound of cups clinking. But Lyria kept glancing his way. There was something fragile about him, but also unbreakable, like a stone weathered by centuries of rain. When he finished, he stood and placed a few credits on the counter. "Thanks for the meal," he said. Lyria caught his gaze with her 4 eyes. "You'll come back, won't you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I will." And as he stepped out into the storm-lit night, the silver waitress watched through the glass, her reflection mixing with his shadow. She didn't understand why her heart felt heavier. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was pity, or maybe, though she didn't yet know it, she had just met the one human who would change everything on Cora 9. In the days that followed, Evan became a quiet part of the diner's routine. He always sat at the same corner table, the one near the big window where the purple storms of Cora 9 danced in the distance. Every evening he ordered the same thing, Lyria's version of stew and a glass of chilled stellar water. He never asked for anything different, and he never complained about the strange metallic taste. Lyria started to notice his habits, the way he stirred his drink before taking a sip. The way he always wiped the condensation from the glass with his sleeve. The way his eyes sometimes stared through the window, as if they could still see the earth he had lost. She found herself wondering what kind of world could make someone like him, so gentle, yet carrying so much silence. One night, the diner was unusually crowded. Miners from the outer rings had returned after a long cycle of work, and they were loud, drunk, and full of stories. The air smelled like grease, ozone, and trouble. Evan was sitting in his usual corner quietly eating. But the group of Graxian miners at the next table had other plans. The Graxians were huge, thick-skinned beings covered in bony ridges. They worked in the deep mines, digging through plasma storms and molten metal. To them, humans were fragile things, made of soft flesh and impossible optimism. One of them, a towering brute with golden scars, slammed his mug down and shouted, "Hey!" "Human," Evan looked up calmly. "Yeah?" The Graxian grinned, showing sharp teeth. "You're the little hero from the blue world, huh? Heard your kind thinks you're tough." Evan chuckled quietly. "No, we just think we can survive anything if we try hard enough." The others laughed, shaking the table. "Big words for someone who'd melt in one of our tunnels." Lyria frowned from behind the counter. "Leave him alone, Rax. He's done nothing to you." Rax ignored her. "Come on, Softskin. Let's see what humans are made of." "A little challenge, yes?" Evan sighed. He had seen this kind of thing before, on ships, in bars, on Earth. People, no matter their species, always wanted to test what they didn't understand. "What kind of challenge?" he asked. Rax grinned wider. "A drink-off. Real Graxian brew. Let's see if your fragile stomach can handle it." Lyria stepped forward quickly, alarmed. "That drink is toxic to most non-Graxians. Even a few sips could—" But Evan raised his hand, stopping her gently. "It's okay. I'll be careful." The Graxians roared with laughter as Rax poured 2 mugs of thick, glowing liquid. The smell hit Evan instantly, like burned metal mixed with acid. He knew it wasn't safe, but he also knew there was something worse than poison, being seen as weak in front of those who needed to believe in you. He lifted the mug, took a deep breath and drank. The first swallow burned like fire. The second made his vision blur. The third nearly made him gag. But he kept drinking, his face calm, his hands steady. Rax drank too, laughing and pounding his chest. Not bad for a softskin. Minutes passed. One by one, the Graxians began to slow down. Their voices slurred. Their arms grew heavy, but Evan, though pale and shaking, didn't stop. He took another gulp. And another. Finally, Rax groaned and dropped his mug with a heavy thud. "You crazy human," he muttered, slumping forward. The diner went silent. Everyone stared. Evan wiped his mouth, took a deep breath, and smiled weakly. "Guess I win." Lyria rushed over, her 4 eyes wide in shock. "Already? You can do that again so fast?" she cried, seeing him reach for another sip. He laughed hoarsely. "It's called stubbornness. Comes free with being human." She helped him sit down as the crowd broke into laughter and applause. Even a few Graxians chuckled, raising their mugs in respect. For the first time since he'd arrived on Cora 9, Evan wasn't just another traveler. He was the human who beat a Graxian. Word would spread quickly. Stories always did on the station. But for Lyria, the real story wasn't about the contest. It was about the moment afterward when Evan's hands trembled slightly, and she saw him hide the pain behind a tired smile. "Why do you do things like that?" she whispered as she cleaned the table beside him. He looked at her, his voice quiet. "Because sometimes the only way people stop seeing you as weak is when you show them how much you can take." Lyria didn't know what to say. She wanted to scold him, to tell him that survival wasn't strength, that living mattered more than winning. But when she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, she stayed silent. That night, as she watched him walk out into the storm again, she realized something strange. It wasn't pride she felt for the human. It was worry. And in a place where everyone came and went like passing comets, that kind of worry meant something more. After the drinking contest, Evan Hale became a small legend on Station Cora 9. Word traveled fast through the docking bays and trade corridors. A human outdrank a Graxian and lived to tell the tale. It was a story that spread with laughter and disbelief. But while others told it for fun, Evan didn't seem to care about the fame. He still came to the same diner, sat at the same table, and ordered the same stew and stellar water. He was the same quiet man who stared at storms through the window as if they were whispering secrets only he could hear. Lyria, however, noticed the changes in him. His hands trembled less now, his shoulders were a little straighter, and sometimes when she brought his food, he'd smile in a way that wasn't forced. Still, there was something behind his eyes that she couldn't understand, something heavy. One slow evening, the diner was nearly empty. The hum of the machines filled the silence as Lyria wiped down tables. Evan sat alone, sketching something on a small notepad with a dull pencil. Curious, she floated closer. "What are you drawing?" He looked up, surprised. Then he turned the pad toward her. It was a rough sketch of a mountain and a bright blue sky above it. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Where is it?" "Earth," he replied. "A place called Colorado. I used to go there when I was younger. Clean air, cold rivers, sunlight that felt alive." Lyria stared at the drawing for a long moment. "It sounds peaceful." "It was," he said, "before everything fell apart." She hesitated, unsure if she should ask. "You said before that your world was gone. What did you mean?" Evan took a slow breath, his gaze drifting back to the storm outside. Earth didn't explode or anything dramatic. It just broke, bit by bit. We poisoned our oceans, burned our skies, fought over everything that didn't matter. By the time people realized what they were losing, it was too late. Whole cities turned into ash. Governments fell. The lucky ones left. His voice grew softer. "I wasn't one of the lucky ones. I stayed too long, lost too much. When I finally left, I didn't even look back." Lyria felt her throat tighten. She had heard of dying planets, of species destroying themselves, but hearing it from someone who had lived it was different. It was pain spoken through calmness. She reached out, placing one silver hand over his. "You still remember it," she said quietly. He nodded. "Every day. I used to think forgetting would help, but forgetting hurts more. It's like losing it twice." For a moment, they sat in silence. Outside, lightning flashed, painting their reflections on the glass. Lyria saw how small he looked beside her, just a fragile human in a universe full of giants. Yet somehow he seemed stronger than most of them. "Why come here, then?" she asked. "To Cora 9 of all places. This station isn't kind to anyone, let alone a human alone." Evan smiled faintly. "Maybe I wanted to see if there was still something worth believing in, something still standing." Lyria's eyes softened. "You humans always say things like that. You chase hope even when there's none left. I don't understand it." He shrugged. "Neither do we. Maybe that's why we survive. We don't need reasons, we just keep going." The words lingered between them like a small flame in the dark. That night, Lyria stayed after closing. The lights were dim, the machines silent. She stood by Evan's table long after he had gone, staring at the half-finished sketch he had left behind. A simple mountain beneath a bright blue sky. She touched the page gently, as if she could feel what Earth had once been. The next day, she pinned that drawing behind the counter where everyone could see it. When customers asked what it was, she'd say, "A memory of a world that refused to give up." Slowly, the diner began to change too. More humans started visiting, pilots, traders, engineers. Some came because of the food. Others came because they had heard about the human who survived the Graxians. But Lyria knew the real reason. They came because, in Evan's quiet way, he reminded them that even in the darkest corners of space, humanity still had a heartbeat. Every night after that, when he walked in through the glowing door, Lyria would feel something strange stir inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just admiration. It wasn't pity either. It was something deeper, something that made her want to understand this fragile creature who had lived through the end of his world and still managed to smile. She began to wait for him each evening, and though she told herself it was just habit, a part of her already knew the truth. She didn't want to imagine Cora 9 without him in it. The night the storm came, Cora 9 felt like it was holding its breath. The air outside shimmered with strange energy, and the violet clouds that usually danced quietly across the sky had turned violent. Bolts of electric light streaked across the horizon, shaking the metal bones of the station. Inside the diner, business was slower than usual. Most travelers had stayed on their ships, waiting for the storm to pass. Only a few brave or foolish souls had come for a warm meal before the worst hit. The lights flickered every few minutes, humming weakly as the power grid strained. Lyria tried to stay calm, but she could feel the pressure in the air. Even her silver skin tingled with static. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for him. And right before the next flash of lightning, the door slid open. Evan Hale stepped inside, shaking the rain off his jacket. His hair was damp and his cheeks were cold, but he still gave her that same quiet smile. "You shouldn't be out in this," Lyria said as he sat down. "The storm is worse than usual. The outer shields might fail." He shrugged lightly. "I've been through worse weather." "That's not funny," she scolded. "This isn't Earth rain. The energy outside could tear through a hull." He met her gaze with calm eyes. "If something happens, I'd rather be here than alone in my quarters." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him he was reckless, but the truth was, she was relieved he had come. For a while, they tried to pretend everything was normal. She served him his usual stew and drink, and he asked about her people, trying to distract her from the thunder echoing through the walls. But then, a sudden, deafening crack tore through the diner. The lights flickered violently, then went out. The storm had hit. Screams rose from outside as people rushed through the corridors searching for safety. Emergency sirens began to wail, and the red glow of backup lights filled the diner. "Shields are down," someone shouted from the hallway. "The station's power grid is failing." Lyria froze. She looked at the flickering monitor on the wall. It showed rising radiation levels and a dangerously unstable core. The diner's systems began to spark, sending tiny arcs of blue electricity across the metal floor. She turned to Evan. "We have to evacuate, now." But he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the emergency readout. "Wait, look at that. The shield generator's still responding. It's just overloaded. If I can reroute the current from the lower deck, we might stabilize it." She shook her head violently. "The lower deck is flooded with plasma gas. The radiation down there would kill you." He looked at her, and in that moment, she saw it. The same quiet fire that lived in all humans. That stubborn light that refused to die. "Someone has to do it," he said softly. "And I've worked with systems like these before. I can do it." "Evan, no." Lyria grabbed his arm, her 4 eyes wide with fear. "You'll never make it back." He smiled faintly, his voice calm even as alarms screamed around them. "You once said humans do impossible things. Let me prove you right." Before she could stop him, he turned and ran toward the maintenance hatch at the back of the diner. The door sealed behind him with a hiss, leaving her staring at the empty space where he'd been. She wanted to follow him, but she knew she'd only slow him down. Her hands trembled as she watched the monitors, each one showing the shield levels dropping lower and lower. If they failed completely, the entire outer ring of the station would disintegrate. The minutes stretched like hours. The diner shook with every surge of lightning. Customers huddled together, praying in a dozen different languages. Then, through the static-filled calm, a voice broke through. "Lyria." It was him. "I found the conduit. It's damaged, but I can reroute the grid manually." Her throat tightened. "Evan, get out of there. You don't have the suit for that. You'll burn alive." There was silence for a moment. Then his voice came again, soft but steady. "You aliens always think death is what stops us. But back home, we built everything knowing it could fall apart. We just keep rebuilding anyway." The comm crackled. Sparks burst from the control panels. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The hum of power returned to the station. The sirens went silent. Outside, the storm's violent glow began to fade. Everyone in the diner stared in disbelief as the readings returned to normal. The shield was holding. Lyria pressed the comm to her lips. tears welling in her eyes. "Evan, it's working. You did it." But there was no answer. Her heart dropped. She didn't care about protocol or safety anymore. She pushed through the diner doors and sprinted down the dark corridor toward the lower deck, ignoring the smoke, the sparks, and the heat. Her mind repeated only one thought. He has to be alive. The metal floor was hot under her steps. The smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. Somewhere deep inside, she heard the distant sound of water dripping, mixed with the faint hum of a human heartbeat struggling against silence. She followed it, and what she found at the bottom of the maintenance bay would change her forever. Smoke filled the lower deck of Cora 9 like a dark ocean. The air was thick with heat and the stinging scent of melted metal. The emergency lights pulsed weakly, painting the corridor in red and shadow. Lyria's boots clanged against the floor as she ran, her heart pounding so fast she could barely breathe. "Evan," she called out, her voice echoing through the hollow chamber. "Evan, answer me." No reply. Only the faint hum of dying circuits and the low hiss of steam. Her hands shook as she climbed over fallen pipes and twisted wires. Sparks rained from the ceiling, but she didn't stop. She didn't care about the radiation warnings flashing across her wristband. She only cared about finding him. When she reached the core room, her breath caught in her throat. The door was half melted, and the control consoles inside were blackened with scorch marks. And there, lying against the wall, was Evan. He wasn't moving. Lyria's vision blurred for a moment as she stumbled forward, kneeling beside him. His clothes were burned in places, his hands red and blistered. His face was pale, too pale, but there was still a faint rise and fall in his chest. "Evan," she whispered, her voice breaking. Hey, stay with me." He groaned softly, his eyes fluttering open. They looked dull and distant at first, then slowly focused on her. When he saw her face, he smiled weakly. "Lyria, you're here?" Tears filled her eyes. "Of course I'm here." "You fool, what were you thinking?" He coughed, the sound rough and painful. "I was thinking someone had to fix it. You almost died," she shouted, gripping his hand tightly. "You could have waited for the repair drones." His fingers trembled in hers. They wouldn't have made it in time. The core was seconds from collapse. He tried to laugh but winced in pain. Guess humans still know how to be stubborn. Lyria's throat tightened. She looked around at the damage, at the sparks and glowing wires, and realized what he had done. Somehow, through sheer willpower and pain, he had reconnected the entire power grid. He had saved the station. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Why would you risk your life like that?" He looked at her, eyes soft but tired. "Because that's what we do. Back on Earth, we used to say, when everything breaks, someone has to fix it. I just didn't want to be the one who ran away again." Lyria blinked, confused. "Again?" He closed his eyes for a moment. "When the wars started on Earth, I tried to save people. But there were too many, and I wasn't fast enough. I escaped when I should have stayed. I told myself leaving would keep me alive, but it only made me feel dead." The words hit her like a blade. She could see it now. The guilt, the quiet sadness behind every smile, every calm look he gave. He hadn't been running from the universe. He had been running from himself. Her 4 eyes shimmered with tears. "Evan, you don't have to keep proving you're worth saving. You already are." He smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who believes that." "I do," she whispered. "Because I've seen you fight for a world that isn't even yours anymore." He tried to speak, but his strength was fading. His head rested back against the wall, and for a moment Lyria panicked. "No, don't close your eyes, stay awake." He managed a small chuckle. "You're bossy for a waitress." Her heart twisted at his joke. "And you're stupid for a hero." Footsteps echoed behind her, the sound of medical drones approaching. They scanned Evan quickly, wrapping his burns in blue nanogel. Lyria refused to let go of his hand as they lifted him onto a hover stretcher. When they carried him toward the infirmary, she followed close behind, her heart heavy but filled with something else too, pride. As they moved through the corridors, other beings stopped and stared. Word had spread fast, the humans saved the shields. Workers, traders, even Graxian miners watched in silence as the drones passed by. Some bowed their heads, others clapped softly, but Evan didn't see any of it. His eyes were half closed, his voice barely a whisper as he turned his head toward Lyria. "Did we make it?" She nodded, tears falling freely now. "Yes, you saved everyone." He smiled weakly. "Good. Then maybe this time..." I finally fixed something that mattered. His hand slipped limp in hers as the drones entered the medical bay. Lyria stood at the doorway long after they closed it behind him. The hum of the station filled her ears, and through the window, she could see the violet storms calming outside. The light from them cast a glow across her silver skin. For the first time in her life, she realized what humans truly were. Not just fragile creatures made of flesh and pain, but something greater. Something that refused to stop, even when the universe gave them every reason to. And as she pressed her hand against the cold glass, she whispered softly, "Don't you dare leave me. Evan Hale, not after this." When Evan finally woke up, the world around him was white and quiet. The steady hum of the medical machines filled his ears like a lullaby. He blinked slowly, his vision blurry at first, but then the shapes around him began to make sense. Clean walls, soft lights, and the faint smell of antiseptic. He was in the infirmary. For a few seconds, he just stared at the ceiling, unsure if he was alive or dreaming. Then the pain hit him, a deep ache in his arms, his chest, and the faint sting of burned skin under the healing gel. He groaned softly. A voice came from nearby. "You're awake." Evan turned his head and saw Lyria sitting by his bedside. Her silver skin glowed softly under the lights, and her 4 eyes shimmered like stars. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair slightly tangled. But when she saw him move, a bright relief washed over her face. "Hey," he said, voice weak but warm. "Guess I made it." She nodded, blinking quickly as if trying not to cry. "You did, barely." He smiled faintly. "That's my style." Her lips trembled, but she managed to smile back. Then her expression changed, anger mixed with fear. "Do you have any idea what you did, Evan? You almost killed yourself." He looked at her quietly for a moment. "Yeah, but the station's still here. That's not the point," she snapped, standing up. "You humans think being brave means throwing your lives away. You act like pain doesn't matter, like you have to prove something to everyone." Her voice cracked at the end. "You didn't have to do it alone." The words hung in the air, heavy and trembling. Evan sighed softly. "I didn't want anyone else to get hurt." "You think watching you die wouldn't hurt?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You think that would have been easier for me?" He froze. For the first time he saw it, not just fear, but something deeper in her eyes. She had cried for him, worried for him, cared for him. "Lyria," he said gently, his hand reaching for hers. She hesitated, then slowly let him take it. Her skin was cool, almost soft like silk. He looked into her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." She shook her head. "You don't understand. You humans always do this. You rush toward danger without thinking. You break yourselves just to prove you can stand again. And yet..." She stopped, lowering her voice. "That's what makes you impossible to forget." Evan felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent. The quiet stretched between them, filled with unspoken things. After a while, Lyria sat back down. Her fingers brushed lightly over the edge of his blanket. "When I saw you lying there, I thought you were gone. I've seen many species die, Evan, but I've never felt it like that before." He smiled sadly. "Guess I'm hard to get rid of." She gave a shaky laugh. "You really are." The door to the infirmary opened then, and the medic droid floated in. "Patient is stable," it reported in a calm voice. "Cellular repair at 60%. Estimated recovery time 32 hours. Evan sighed in relief, but Lyria still looked uneasy. When the droid left, she leaned closer to him. "They said your heart stopped twice." He blinked. "Twice?" She nodded slowly. "You stopped breathing. They almost lost you." Her voice softened. "But you came back. Both times." Evan stared at her, quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, "Maybe I didn't want to leave." She looked at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Why?" He gave her a tired but gentle smile. "Because someone was waiting for me." Lyria's chest tightened at his words. For once she couldn't find anything to say. Her throat felt tight, her heart's beating faster. Silence fell between them again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was filled with warmth, the kind that doesn't need words. Hours passed. Evan eventually drifted into sleep again, but his hand never let go of hers. Lyria sat there watching his chest rise and fall, feeling the steady beat of his pulse under her fingers. She thought about how fragile humans were. Soft skin, weak bones, short lives. and yet there was something inside them that refused to stop. A fire that kept burning no matter how many times the universe tried to put it out. That night, when the station lights dimmed and everyone else slept, Lyria leaned closer and whispered into the quiet room, her voice trembling but full of emotion. "You humans, you burn too bright for this cold universe." And as she rested her head beside his hand, she realized something she never thought she would, that the strange, reckless human had somehow lit a flame inside her too. Evan woke to the sound of quiet humming. Not the cold hum of machinery this time, but something softer, a voice. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lyria sitting by the window, her back turned, softly singing a tune from her world. The melody was slow and sad, yet somehow comforting. He smiled weakly. "That's a nice song." Lyria turned around, startled, then smiled faintly. "It's a song we sing for those who survive impossible things," she said. "It means the universe blinked first." Evan chuckled softly, his voice still rough. "I like that. Has a good ring to it." She stood and walked closer, her expression full of relief. "You shouldn't be talking too much." "You still need rest, yeah," he said, trying to sit up, but the pain made him groan. She quickly helped him, adjusting the pillows behind his back. Her touch was gentle, careful. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two people from different worlds who had somehow found something the galaxy rarely gave anyone: understanding. Evan broke the silence first. "Did they fix the station?" She nodded. "Completely stable now. The shields are holding and the trade lanes are reopening." Her eyes softened. "Everyone knows what you did, Evan. The story spread across half the sector." He frowned slightly. "So I'm the idiot human who almost blew himself up saving the day?" Lyria smiled. "No, you're the human who reminded us what courage looks like." He blinked, quiet. That word, on courage, more used to mean something different to him. Back on Earth, it had meant fighting against the dark, trying to survive when everything was lost. But now, after all this, he realized courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and still choosing to move. "Guess humans still got a few tricks left," he said softly. Lyria tilted her head. "You have more than tricks. You have heart," he met her eyes. "And you helped me find it again." Her lips trembled slightly. "You really mean that?" He nodded slowly. "Before this, I was just drifting, doing jobs, moving from place to place. I thought maybe I didn't belong anywhere anymore, but you made me feel like I still mattered." For a moment, Lyria couldn't speak. Her chest felt tight. No one had ever said words like that to her. Not from their heart. Not with that quiet sincerity that humans carried so easily. She swallowed hard. "You matter to me, Evan Hale, more than you'll ever know." They sat in silence again, the air between them warm and still. Outside, the violet storm that once raged across the planet had cleared. Through the glass window, the stars burned bright and endless, scattered across the black like silver dust. Evan looked out at them and smiled faintly. "You know, back home, I used to look at stars like that and wonder if someone out there was watching too." Lyria's voice softened. "And now someone is." He turned to her, his expression full of quiet gratitude. "Then I guess I don't have to wonder anymore." Her 4 eyes shimmered with light. For once, she didn't try to hide what she felt. She reached out, her hand resting over his. The two of them sat like that for a long time, human warmth meeting alien calm, and for that small moment, it didn't matter what worlds they came from. Later that day, when Evan could walk again, the station crew gathered in the central hall. Dozens of species filled the chamber, some tall and scaled, others small and feathered. They stood in silence as Captain Wren spoke, his voice echoing through the hall. "This station stands because of one man," the captain said, turning toward Evan. "A human, fragile by nature but stronger than any of us realized. Let his actions remind us that the measure of a being is not in their size or species, but in the fire they carry." Applause filled the room. Evan felt embarrassed but proud. Lyria stood beside him, smiling quietly. She didn't need to say anything. The look they shared said enough. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Evan and Lyria walked together along the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them. "Do you think you'll go back to Earth someday?" she asked softly. He thought for a long time before answering. "Maybe, but Earth isn't really home anymore." "Then where is home?" He looked at her and smiled gently. "Wherever I'm needed." Lyria's heart skipped a beat. Then stay needed here. Evan chuckled softly. You're making it hard to say no. They both laughed quietly, their reflections shining in the glass as the station glided through the stars. Somewhere deep inside, Lyria knew something had changed forever. Humans weren't just stories anymore, and not just fragile creatures of flesh and hope. They were proof that even in the coldest reaches of the galaxy, warmth could survive. And as the stars shimmered outside, Evan squeezed her hand and whispered, almost to himself, "Already? You can do that again so fast?" Lyria blinked in surprise. "Do what?" He smiled, eyes soft. "Make me feel alive." Her cheeks glowed faintly with color, and for the first time since she'd met him, she couldn't find a reply. She just looked at him, her heart's full, her soul quiet. And for once, the universe didn't feel so cold. In that endless stretch of stars, 2 lives, 1 human, 1 alien, had found something rare, a reason to keep fighting, a reason to keep feeling in a flame that would never fade, end.